Castlevania is another game that was requested that I review, and being that it's a classic, I couldn't say no. It's one of the earlier games to grace NES catalog, and it's the beginning of a series that's still cranking out titles. Thankfully, they got easier over the years. Eventually, but that's besides the point. Castlevania starts with Simon Belmont walking to the gates of Dracula's castle. Tasked with slaying the king of vampires, Simon's only armed with a whip. Of course it gets upgraded to a more powerful whip, and you do get some other smaller weapons available for use, but the whip is going to be your main method of attack. To find the upgrades, you whip candles and torches. That's right, whipping candles drops hearts, bags of money, and weapons. I have no idea where Konami got that idea from, but strangely enough, it works well. As for the stuff that actually pops out of them, the bags of money will give out points. There's no other reason for them. Weapons are pretty obvious, but the hearts are what powers those sub-weapons. That's right, the hearts don't actually increase your life in any way. Instead, they act as power for your weapons. Each of the weapons, other than the stopwatch, only uses up one heart per use, so it's fairly cheap to use them. Figuring that most of the times, you'll probably only need your sub-weapons for the bosses, and you can accumulate a good amount of ammo for them. Let me run down the weapons you'll obtain. I've already mentioned the whip, so let's move on to the dagger. It's your basic throwing knife, and has a straight trajectory. The axe has a high-angled throw, and is great for taking out distant, airborne enemies, such as the first boss. The stopwatch is the only weapon to use up 3 hearts per use, and it'll stop your enemies in their tracks for about 3 or 4 seconds. It can really come in handy in parts where you need to jump cliffs, and there's enemies flying at you at the same time. You have a boomerang in the form of a cross, and it behaves just like you would expect it to. Finally, you have holy water, which freezes your foes but also damages them. The difference is that it doesn't have very long range. The only other thing you may find in the candles is a Roman numeral 2 or 3. What these will do is allow you to fire more than one projectile at a time. So, with the 3, you can throw 3 daggers, and so on. What the game lacks in story, it really makes up for in gameplay. It's very simplistic in nature, but it's also so much fun. You run through the levels, whipping torches at enemies. You get the boss, and you kill it. Or at least, you attempt to kill it. It's not always easy, and there's reasons for that. The game is insanely difficult. As always, there's a few reasons for this. First, Simon gets knocked back every time he gets hit. If there's water or a cliff nearby, you may as well kiss your ass goodbye. Second, the controls can feel a bit stiff at times, especially while attacking. Simon can only whip straight ahead, so when dealing with enemies like bats and those flying Medusa-looking heads, it can be difficult to strike them without getting hit yourself. Thankfully, Simon can destroy enemy fireballs with the whip, but it can be difficult to actually time your attack to hit the ball of flame. Another thing is that at the beginning of the game, enemies will only hurt you a minimal amount. However, with each stage you progress through, those same enemies will start dealing more damage, to the point that you'll die in 4 hits. You have 16 life bars on the top of the screen. Why does everything have to deal so much damage? This is extremely frustrating at Dracula, but I'll get to that shortly. One other thing is that you can't just fall off platforms and expect Simon to gracefully fall to the next spot. Instead, Simon practically just plunges off the platform edges. This can be a huge problem when trying to navigate tricky jumps. Thankfully, the game gives you infinite continues. It will often put you back to the stage right after a boss when you continue, but each segment of the castle is made up of 3 stages. There's 6 total segments, and when you get to stage 18, which is Dracula's lair, you get to continue there. This is a huge improvement over Ninja Gaiden's bullshit, ruthless system of putting you all the way back to 6-1 every time you die at 6-3 or 6-4. The level of detail in this game is just plain fantastic. The game has a rich gothic feel, and has the look of something you might expect a vampire to be living in. The music also helps accompany the game's gothic atmosphere, with some upbeat and mysterious tunes. The boss battle theme fits pretty well, and gives you the sense that you're fighting for your life. There are a few songs that repeat, but it's not something that's really going to bother you, as there's really not one weak song in the game. Let's talk about the bosses for a bit. Each boss can be difficult unless you have the right weapon for the job. The first boss is a giant bat, which just swoops down at you to attack. You get the axe right before him, and should be used to defeat him. The second boss is Medusa, who just flies around the area throwing snakes at you. Again, the holy water is found right before her, and should be used to minimize effort needed. Third is a pair of mummies, which throw what looks like linen wraps at you. I used the dagger here, but from here on out, I'm not really sure what the best weapons to use are. Fourth is our good friend, the Frankenstein monster. He has some sort of hunchback thing jumping at you at the same time, and he's incredibly difficult to defeat due to that tiny little bastard. The 5th stage I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth, for the sole reason it's probably the hardest stage in the game. The first room is pretty easy enough, even with those skeletons that don't actually die. It's actually stage 14 that the trouble starts, as you need to kill these knights with shields that take a good 6 hits or so. To make things even more fun, they throw axes at you. Now, this isn't still a huge problem, until you get to stage 15. The room right before the boss is pure hell. You have those Medusa head things along with the shielded knights, so you need to work at maintaining maximum health by dodging the heads and attacking the knights. Those heads don't stop until you hit the end of the hall either. It's very frustrating, but if you can get a method down to attacking and defending, you should be okay. The boss of this area is the Grim Reaper. Many people have said he's the hardest boss in the game, even harder than Dracula. Honestly, I didn't have that much trouble at him. The reason he is difficult though is because he's right after that hallway and there's no health power-ups around. He commands a bunch of whirling skits that fly erratically towards you. If you keep calm and collected, he really shouldn't be much of a problem. Just focus on doing more dodging than attacking and you should be fine. After killing him, you move on to the final section of the game. The first area, stage 16, is a bitch because you have about 4 or 5 of the large bats waiting for you. You can attempt to kill them, but I just chose to avoid them and keep moving. Stage 17 isn't too bad, but stage 18 is the Count himself. Just let me say that I think it took me about 2 hours to finally figure out how to effectively kill Dracula. First, he has 2 forms, and the first isn't too bad. He'll teleport around, often to where you're standing. He'll open up his cape and 3 fireballs will be thrown at you. The key is that you can only hit Dracula in the head, so if you can get the timing right, you can jump, hit Dracula, fall, immediately duck and whip, and the fireballs will be destroyed. As I said before, even if it does take a few tries to get it right, continuing from a game over will allow you to start here. You get the choice of a boomerang or holy water as weapons, and although I thought the holy water was useless, it's only for Dracula's first form. The second form is just as vulnerable to the holy water as every other enemy, and also makes it slightly easier since it does freeze him. The thing is that there's not a health power-up at all, so you need to kill both forms of Dracula before you take 4 hits. Let me put this into perspective here. You get 4 hits. Dracula gets a full 16, and his second form gets 32 since he takes 2 hits before taking any noticeable damage. This means that you pretty much have 4 life bars, and Dracula has 48. Let me illustrate this for you. Yeah, that's definitely fair, right? Anyway, once you finish the game, you get a pretty lame ending where the castle crumbles to the ground and a cast of credits appear, which are really just names of people that were involved in the Dracula books or movies that got their names altered. After that, the game just starts again without any kind of warning. But now, it's even freaking harder. Enemies on the first stage will keep doing their maximum damage to you. There are more foes, and because of this, I can't even beat the fucking bat. That's pretty sad, isn't it? I gave up, because as far as I was concerned, I finished this damn game. As I said before, Castlevania is a classic game that is a must-play for any gamer. It does have its cons, such as the occasionally stiff-feeling combat, but overall, it's a very solid game that has still aged incredibly well. It's still hailed as gamers as one of the best games on the NES, or possibly of all time. There's a reason for that. It's that damn good. Final score? 9 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.